Welcome back. I'm back with Greg. I'm very excited. Still excited. 3 in.
Amazing. We're still doing this.
And we're kind of wrapping up for now our little series here on behavioral finances and just kind of understanding our own biases, our own emotions. And, we kind of introduced it to you. We talked last week about not all of them, but a good chunk of the biases you can face in the world, and how they relate not only to finances, but all my real world examples that I toss in there. And that's just because that's just how I relate it to myself. And now we're going to kind of talk about some actionable, I guess, skills, actionable things we can do to avoid some of this, or to maybe fight against it a little bit, maybe too, right? Like, I don't know that we can avoid all of them, but at least we can put some roadblocks in place to hopefully stop us from doing some of those emotional things.
Absolutely.
Does that sound fair?
Yeah, that's a perfect description, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's certain ways that we can kind of correct in the moment, and there's also some certain things that we can do proactively to head off these these cognitive biases that we all have, that we're all prone to. None of us are robots. We all have emotions. We all have feelings. We've all had things that have impacted us and changed the way we feel about things. So it's there's things that we can put in place to try to avoid those and make our investments more of a rational, evidence-based approach versus responding kind of in knee-jerk ways to emotions.
Yeah. Well, and I think for the listeners, the good news for you is you're already a couple steps on, because our first one is education and self-awareness. So
that's right.
You're already on the path to success.
That's exactly right. You've already gained the building blocks.
Yeah. Because one of the first things is just being aware about it, right, Greg?
It is, and that's where it all starts. And I think we have talked about this in every episode, and so we may as well complete the hat trick, right? The Gordie Howe hat trick. It's being aware of what we're doing, right? And kind of being able to step outside ourselves and look down at what we're feeling, and just kind of naming it and identifying it and recognizing it is so important. That emotional intelligence. And we all are subject to emotions at different times, and you can't stop emotions from coming, right? There is no way that I'm aware of for humans to, unless it's with significant, medication, to avoid being sad sometimes, avoid being happy, avoid feeling overwhelmed or anxious. These emotions will come, right? There may be all sorts of triggers, external, internal, whatever the case may be. These emotions are going to come. What you can do, right, kind of at the peak of self-actualization, is regulating them, recognizing them, being aware of them, and then taking steps to regulate them. And you can do that in the moment. And then you can also take steps to almost kind of dummy-proof yourself from some of your emotions and head them off. And even if they're happening, it's not going to impact things because you've already put a few things in place.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I like that. And I think it's kind of putting in the checks and balances of just the whole of yourself, basically, right? And
exactly right.
And I mean, I think we do, to give credit to myself mostly, but maybe some of our listeners. I think in this day and age, hopefully we're already doing that, and going looking at things. I know I always equate these to real world, but like one of the things, my favorite thing to do lately has been, my wife will see like a poster for a new movie that's coming out on Facebook, and she'll be like, "Is this real or is this AI?" Right? And we have to really sit there and think about it. And I go, "No, it's AI. It's AI." And so hopefully doing that with everything, especially with financial decisions, right? And your risk tolerance, and just looking at it and going, is this how I really feel about this? Or am I just reacting to something in this moment? Is there some sort of outside influence that's making me make this decision, or calling Greg to say, I want to get out of this particular investment,
Exactly. And I think, if you look at the way that we approach it, and I think any good financial advisor approaches it, it's kind of beginning with the end in mind, right?
Hmm.
So sitting down with folks, talking to them about what the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years uh, that they want it to look like. And, where do they, what is their definition of great life? That means very different things for
Oh,
very different people,
100%.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, some want the second home and warmer climates. Some want something very different than that. It's going to differ person to person. So we sit down with folks, we talk to them about what that looks like for them. If they can envision it, what do they see?
Mm.
Um, then we talk about where they are currently, income stream, expenses, obligations, etc., upcoming things that are going to need to be funded and dealt with. It could be a child's education, could be wedding of your daughter, could be a number of different things. We want to talk to them about their comfort with risk and the risk that they are uh, comfortable in taking, and how they respond and feel about shifts in the market.
Yeah.
That's important.
Yeah.
And there's tools to do that. There are risk questionnaires. They're not foolproof, right? There's a lot of variability across all these different questionnaires. Um, they're not a perfect measurement, but they're
Mm.
at least a step, a tool. Really, what it comes down to is getting to know your client, and getting to know, geez, if the market drops 10% in a day, right? Like picture COVID, some of the steep drops that
Yeah.
we had during the heightened fear of COVID. Are you someone that's going to call me and say sell everything?
Mm.
Are you someone that's going to kind of stay calm? Are you someone that might not even know that it's going on because you know that this is a 30-year deal, and
Right.
and
Yeah.
and you just trust that everything is in place?
Yeah.
Getting to know folks on that kind of intimate and personal level is important,
Yeah.
right? Because it plays into what you put into place for them in terms of kind of combating some of those uh, emotions and biases.
Well, and I think it's interesting, right? And this is one of our actionable items, which is consulting with an advisor who has an unbiased perspective. And I think to that point, you personally may think you're okay with risk and a high risk, and then when it happens, you then suddenly go, "Oh, no, I wasn't ready.
Right.
That was not what I thought that meant."
This doesn't feel good at all.
Yeah.
Right.
I said I was ready for this, but I am not. And I think that's where a good advisor comes in and says, "Okay, yes, you're saying high risk. Let's go pedal to the metal. But what let's talk about what that actually means. Let's look at it, and you may back down from that and be more moderate, or
Right.
or some risk. And I think just having a person who's rational, who has the expertise, who has an outside perspective, and just can have that steady hand on the wheel is going to be helpful for you, right?
That's exactly right. And there's a few different ways of looking at that and a few different approaches, right? There's the risk that we're comfortable with, but there's also sometimes the risk that we need to take,
Yeah,
right? So if
of
somebody
course.
comes to us, and they're 55 years old, and maybe they had a number of different life events that impacted their ability to really save and
Hmm.
plan for the future. They could have gone through a divorce. They could have gone through a major medical
Yeah.
issue that sapped their resources. You see this in a number of different scenarios, and they're behind, right? They don't want to work till they're 90. They would love to retire at a
Hmm.
reasonable age, say 65, even 70, and they're behind the eight ball. Well, we show them what the projections play out, right? At this level of saving, at this type of portfolio, this is what you can hope, reasonably expect to have at age 65 or 70. It may be that you need to take a
Hmm.
little bit more risk to achieve your objectives.
Yep.
But the important thing is having that conversation and getting buy-in. Investment policy statements can play a big role in that, kind of showing This is what we talked about.
Right.
This is what, this is what your goals are.
Yeah.
This is what we need to do to reach those goals. This is the allocation that's required to do that of your portfolio. That's a big thing, right?
Yeah.
And then you always revisit that, right?
Of course.
Often.
100%.
Is
Yeah.
this still good? Does it still feel
Right.
good? Let's look at where our projections are. Are we on pace? Are we off pace? How are you feeling about it? How did this last few days in the market feel to you, right? We've got a new administration changing a lot of policies all at once. A lot of different changes, putting some stress on the market. How did that feel?
Yeah.
Are you queasy at night? Are you not sleeping? Because we don't want folks not sleeping. That's the last thing we want, right? We want them leaving our office and going forth in life feeling lighter. If they're feeling lighter and know, like you said, there's a steady hand on the wheel, and they trust in that, then we're really doing our jobs well.
Yeah, and I think that's big, right? Because with any decision that's emotional and has any like long-term effects tied to it, right? It's a difficult decision in the moment, and I find for me personally, sometimes I wasn't 100% paying attention because my mind was roaming on this one thing that somebody said, or am I really ready for risk? Like, and that's just what I focus on for the rest of the meeting,
right.
And so having that ability to connect with someone, and say, okay, can you remind me? I know we talked about this, or have the documentation in front of you and go, okay, this is what yes, all right, I understand what we're doing. And just not every day, but, annually checking in and just making sure, like, are we still good?
And the flip side of it is a big thing too. People always think about that they might have, buyer's remorse, so to speak, when they've chosen a very aggressive portfolio and we go through a volatile period and there's a dip, right, in performance and in their values. And you have to talk them through that. Okay, this was what led us to this allocation, right? These were your goals. These were the projections. This is what it was showing. This is why we collectively together chose this. But we see it on the opposite end of the spectrum as well. When we meet with folks and they are adamant that, oh no, I have no risk tolerance whatsoever. This stuff makes me sick to my stomach. I will be up all night, every night, if I see massive swings in my portfolio. So if we match a portfolio very tailored to that, very conservative, to limit the volatility as much as possible, that's great. But that also needs reminders, right? Because in great market times,
right,
where equities are going through the roof, and they're seeing, because we've talked about this, they're getting all kinds of onslaught of information on a daily basis from TikTok and Instagram and the news channels and all the various, oh my God, the market's on fire. People are making money hand over fist. And they're seeing a 3% growth rate. Well, how come I'm not making all this money that TikTok's talking about? Well, remember, like, this is what, there's trade-offs, right? So it's that revisiting, it's keeping on track. It's that, looking at the end goal, but also, making sure that we're in line with that, our unique risk tolerances.
Yeah, and I think, one of the topics too we wanted to cover, which is in line with that, is avoiding those present biases, which is up or down, right, is kind of automating a lot of this and just saying, okay, whether it's you or you're doing it with your advisor, you're just going to automate the investments and you're just going to take a step back because it's just going to make that first decision once, allowing that future growth without you affecting it based on what's happening that day or that month.
That's exactly right. I mean, it becomes a thing that you don't think about. It's going out of your account automatically or out of your paycheck automatically. It's why a lot of retirement plans now have an automatic opt-in feature, right? push people, nudge people towards saving for their future, they have to take an affirmative action to opt out of the retirement plan. It's kind of nudging folks towards these things that are for their own good, and that does combat a lot of it. And really, it's the advisor's job to constantly bring you back to your plan, right? Yep. Every one of our clients has a financial plan tailored to them, and it covers all sorts of different categories, tax efficiency and estate plan and insurance analysis and retirement and budget. And it's up to the advisor to constantly be checking into that plan and saying, okay, even with all the volatility, we've got this in place, check. We've got this in place, check. Like reassuring them that we're still on the path to where they want to get to.
Well, and I think too, setting those long-term goals or your, deciding what your great life is in 10, 20, 30 years, you'll start to see the patterns, right, of how that's working out. And so when you get in a couple years into this and you have those long-term goals, you're not torn by these biases, these impulsive biases, and you're just seeing the pattern. You're going, oh, you know what? There were some ups, there were some downs, and we've just seen a steady return. That's actually not bad.
That's exactly right.
That's actually really good.
Yeah. And when looking at, and that's one of the ways to combat this, right, is showing folks, look what the S&P has done over the course of the last 75 years, 100 years. If you are well diversified and you've got a portfolio in line with and in accordance with your goals and your risk tolerance, and it's being rebalanced and looked at like we do on a weekly basis, it's going to work.
Yeah.
I hate this. I have grown to hate this expression because it now represents a complete failure with the Philadelphia 76ers, but trust the process, right? Yeah. Like if you remember when Joel Embiid came aboard, it hasn't worked out that well for the 76ers, but in many ways, evidence-based, stick to the plan, revisit frequently, right? Make sure that everything is still in accordance with your goals and your risk and all of those things. But it's up to the advisor to sometimes convince folks that the most important action you can take right now is not taking an action.
Inaction.
That's right. Sometimes taking that drastic knee-jerk reaction, because that's inherent in all of us. If something bad is happening, chaos is flying all around, we want to do something.
Yep.
Well, sometimes that's the worst thing you can do.
Yeah.
And ask the folks that, went to cash in the height of COVID. They missed that rebound that happened just a couple months after, right? That drastic action is sometimes the worst thing for you. Yeah. So that's really where the advisor kind of earns their keep.
Yeah, and I think too, a takeaway for the audience as well is, and you had said it in there, is diversity and embracing that and understanding that, like, let's take NVIDIA as an example, right? Like that starts to shoot to the moon, like, and a lot of people like put everything I have in NVIDIA, right? And you don't want that, right? Because where there's an up, there's a down, and you want to make sure that you're guarded against that. And so by diversifying, like, sure, maybe there's a little bit in NVIDIA or whatever to get you some money, but you want to diversify across multiple assets and classes so that you're stable.
That's exactly right. I don't. It was said here recently by either Alan or Doug, and I stealing it as my own. I've used it 100 times since then. Diversification means always having to say you're sorry. There's always going to be one hot sector, one hot stock, one very narrow thing that's taking off or outperforming everything else. And geez, if we were, psychics, you'd have it all there, just like you just said. But that's not. Yeah. That is not logical, right. And it makes, it's not responsible, and it would breach our fiduciary duty to have you allocated across a number of sectors. That way you're going to take advantage of whatever is, the hot thing at the moment. Sure, there may be something else that lags at that particular time. That's okay.
Yeah.
It's kind of part of the overall plan.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just trusting in that process, like you said, and in the plan, and then just going back and just really thinking about, your realistic great life, right? And just saying, okay, does this up or down or whatever it is truly affect that great life? And a lot of the time the answer is no. It's
That's correct.
Yeah, because it's that great life isn't, maybe for some people we have dreams of like being a millionaire, a billionaire, or whatever that is, but like, is that a realistic great life, or is your great life, just in 30, 50 years, oh, I got grandkids, they come over, we have a house that's paid off, we've got, maybe we get to go on a vacation twice, two, three times a year with the grandkids and our children. Like, that's honing that and grounding it into something that's based in reality, I think is the best for all of us. And just say, what do I really want out of this?
100%. And, what we often see sometimes is, folks are existing off of far less than what they have, right? And, they've got, X dollars invested and they're not even coming close
Yeah.
to needing all of it. But yet their emotions are as if, they can't make,
Yeah.
they can't eat next week.
Yeah.
So you have to say, wait, hold on. Let's take a larger picture here. Your income stream is X, your expenses are Y. Your assets are actually growing year after year in retirement. They're not even dwindling down. So a turbulent month, a turbulent cycle is not going to impact your day-to-day life
Yeah.
in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
You're actually managing these investments for the next generation. So let's think about what a 20-year-old would want in terms of allocation, because that's really who you're managing these investments for.
Yeah. Right.
So it's every situation is different. Every client's goals and situation and great life is unique to them. So it's knowing that and kind of taking that broader
Yeah.
long-term approach.
Yeah. And there's just so many different ways, like you said, that the great life is different, and there's so many different ways that looks to you. And I think not getting stuck in that classical, like, what a great life is, like, and just thinking about personally what it is to you, because I think we're all surprised on how much or little money that actually is needed to make that possible, right?
100%. And we're seeing very big differences generationally too.
Yeah.
And I think that is also something that, is a difference maker these days in terms of, I've talked about emotional intelligence and how that plays into, kind of setting yourself apart as an advisor. Well, being aware of and knowing generational differences and how people look at things generationally is, I think, as important as well, because, what we're seeing is people, coming out of college now and entering the workforce now have very different priorities and ways of thinking than our clients that are in their 70s and 80s and what they value.
Yeah, 100%.
We're seeing more experiences and not as much, emphasis on kind of the second home or whatever the case may be. They want their money on travel and experiencing this, and very different and very different risk tolerances and very different, attitudes about money.
Yeah.
So the one size approach does not fit all, and you have to be aware of who your client is and what's important to them.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think for the listeners, again, understanding that for yourself and say, and not having that, like, that looking at your neighbors and going, oh, well, they're doing all this, and really asking yourself, is that your great life, or is that just what you think you should be doing? Right?
Don't fall into that hurting trap.
Yeah,
right? We've talked about that before.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, and that goes across social media and then all these things like, oh, geez, so-and-so's on this trip. How come I'm not on that trip? Well, Do you even want to be on that trip?
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Do you want to go see Taylor Swift? Right. The answer is yes.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Resoundingly.
Yeah, everyone's a yes on that. But yeah, I think that's good, and I hope the folks at home really get to pick up some stuff about this and can look internally and hopefully catch some of these biases in themselves. And yeah, I'm looking forward to having Greg on again. And thanks, Greg, so much. This was great.
Can't wait. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. Please see the full disclosure in our show notes for more information.